Prompt. You receive a draft letter in the mail, but the date on the letter is listed as 2253. Turns out in the future, they draft people from the past whose existence has absolutely no effect on the timeline. Submitted by Reddit user Retro Legolas. In 3 hours, you're going to die. At first, I thought the words were a threat. Wouldn't anyone? They came delivered in a typewritten letter on a plain white page in a standard manila envelope, unmarked, unsigned, and clearly untouched at any step by the postal service. Whoever dropped it off had done so directly, but my cameras hadn't picked up any activity that day. Even reviewing the footage, it seemed that one moment my mailbox was empty, and then the next there was a package suddenly waiting for me. I read and reread the letter several times. The text of it was absurd, of course. How could anyone know when I was set to die unless they were trying to threaten me? But the more I read it, the more I saw that the words weren't a threat, but a warning. A missile attack? I reread that part over and over. We weren't at war with anyone, not that I knew of. Global tensions had eased significantly, at least in our part of the world, and the Prime Minister was even flying off to an economics conference with our would-be attackers. If this was meant to be a prediction of the future, then it was an outlandish one, but the words that followed were even more ridiculous. You have been drafted to serve as an agent in the border skirmish of 2253 to 2387. The letter went on in some detail. The idea of it even tickled me in a way, appealing to childhood sci-fi sensibilities. It reminded me of movies and television shows I had watched as a child, old short stories I'd read by the greats of science fiction, and that curiosity kept me reading more and more. I admit the childish excitement of it all was what got me to even finish the letter. You've yet to begin a family of your own. We know this has always been a regret, but know that it was never meant to be? Not in your timeline. However, we can provide you that opportunity by lifting you from your original moment of death. A duplicate body cloned from your cells we left to discover in the wreckage. It went on like that in great detail. My place in the current timeline was meant to end 3 hours from now in a missile strike. If I accepted the offer presented in the letter, I was to report to the bus stop at the end of the street and wait for the 7:20, a bus which had never been scheduled before. From there, I was to serve 5 years, subjective time, of service to the 23rd century's arm of the Temporal Regulation Authority, and then I would be released to live as a citizen in their subjective present. Draftees, apparently will be the terminology, would then undergo a 3-month initiation course to adjust to living in the reality of the 23rd century. While the letter didn't go into any specific detail about how exactly the markets and economies of our supposed future worked, it reassured me repeatedly that my level of comfort would be far raised from my current conditions, and that my lack of history in their future would not be an issue. 5 years of service, it asked, and then a long and comfortable life, lived far longer than I was ever meant to, if the letter was true. The offer contained proof that what they were saying to me was real. They couldn't send agents directly to my home to meddle with the timeline, they said. That was apparently too risky. And if I were to attempt to share the offer with anyone, the evidence would destroy itself. I don't know how they intended to monitor or achieve this threat, but the very idea of it was enough to keep me from calling around and asking my friends about a possible prank. I wanted to know who had the imagination to even come up with such an idea, to give the merry trickster a well-deserved round of applause for their creativity, but that slight doubt that my offer of salvation could be revoked stayed my hand. It was enough to keep me from speaking with anyone else. 2 hours and 40 minutes since I'd first read the letter, and my first piece of evidence was set to arrive. We regret to inform you that your nation is about to become embroiled in a generational spanning conflict, the letter read. While you may feel the patriotic need to stay behind and serve your country, let us assure you now that although the coming years will be dark, your people eventually prevail through this struggle, and they do so without your aid. I was sitting in the living room of my sparse apartment, glued to the phone and television, flipping through every news channel my old cable package still had, and jumping through every social media feed and news-regurgitating website that I could find. There was no hint of any conflict on the horizon. The news was going on about plainly average things, announcing the development of new phones and the signing of new funding bills and the human interest stories of the day. Still, if the letter was a prank, but one genuinely intended to catch my interest, Surely the prankster would have picked a more likely event to confirm its authenticity. But then, if the news really did show the Prime Minister being shot down, if missiles really did start to fall... 7:15. That's the moment it was all set to begin. White-knuckled, I paced in front of the television, sweaty hands trawling my news feeds. At 7:10, a bulletin told me that my favorite band had announced a new tour and that my city was set to be the first stop. At 7:11, I passed a headline about how this year's summer was officially the hottest on record. At 7:12, the cheerful anchor at the news desk took a moment to acknowledge the passing of Pizza Cat, everyone's favorite internet mascot. His passing was being marked with a free large pepperoni deal. At 7:13, my hands were so slick with sweat that the phone leapt out from my fingers. By 7:14, I was throwing up everything I had into the toilet. I came back 2 minutes past 0 hour to find the news still dutifully going on about the events of the day. Wars, riots, famines, all the usual suspects, but none of it on our borders. I was hit with a mix of relief and a strange tinge of disappointment. Part of me, I knew, actually hoped for this to be true, to have the imagination of my childhood science fiction fan vindicated. But to know that those dreams would come packaged with the deaths of millions, to know how much suffering they would cause, I knew I should be feeling nothing but relief. Life, as it should, would go on as normal. I was in the middle of thinking about how to trace the letter back to the prankster when a special bulletin hit. We're getting word that the Prime Minister's plane has just been shot down over the Sea of Lillian. I would have thrown up again if I had anything left in me. Instead, my knees buckled and I had to catch myself on the back of the couch. My eyes glanced to the letter, plain black-on-white text telling me what would happen next. I flipped through the channels, checked my phone to see if anyone else was reporting it yet, but the news ended up coming to me first. Emergency alert! My phone was screeching at me in harsh tones normally reserved for tests and tornado warnings. I didn't need to read it to know what would follow. Our capital was in flames, devastated from a missile attack, and my city was next on the chopping block. Minutes to find shelter. That's what the alert would be telling everyone. Find somewhere low and pray to whatever you believed in that the force of the blast wouldn't be enough to wipe you off the face of the earth. I ran for the front door, letter in hand. Thankful that I'd been too upset by the letter to take my shoes off from work, I ran down the hall of my apartment after briefly and absurdly wondering for a moment at the closet which coat I should take. I could hear confusion in the apartments around me. Some people were screaming. Already the stairwells were becoming packed with people fleeing the upper floors for the imagined safety of the basement. Caught in the rush of panic, I pushed my way through the crowds, nearly falling several times to the stampede of humanity. As I ran for the front door, several others were running inside. One man held the fob-locked doors open for anyone who would run in off the street. He tried to grab me as I ducked under his arm. "Wait, it's not safe out there!" Cars sat still in the streets, or parked on curbs, or crashed head-on into each other. For whatever reason, I chided them mentally for stopping to check their phones while driving, then leapt over a T-boned sedan that had been pushed onto the sidewalk. The streets were emptying out quickly. Sirens called out through the skies. In minutes, maybe less, missiles would land and wipe out my city. But I saw, too, that I wasn't the only one running. There were a few at first, but others followed. A dozen of us at least. Even at quick glance, I could make out the manila envelopes in their hands, their faces scanning me with a mix of shock and recognition. We had all received the same letters. The 7:20 bus would be here to save us in moments, the letter said. We all, each of us, pushed our way into the tiny stop, hoping somehow that the clear plexiglass windows would protect us from the coming blast. There was a howling in the sky, a distant light, and then we were gone. Thank you for listening to Drafted. Please be sure to leave a like down below if you enjoyed the story, and feel free to leave a comment with your thoughts. I'd love to hear from you all out there. If you'd like to hear more stories from me in the future, be sure to subscribe. I upload at the same time every week. Take care, and I'll see you all next time.